Right, I've got that filming. Good. Let's get stuck into the video. Hello guys, my name's Mark. I'm an entrepreneur and property investor. And in today's video, we're answering a question that I was asked by a guy called, let's find out, Jamie. Jamie asked me this question at 5 o'clock this morning on Instagram, and we had a bit of a chat about it. Should he be paying off debt or investing with the money he's got left over at the end of every month? And this question really started getting my mind working. So I thought I'd come to you today and share my thought process and also the conversation that we had. And I've checked with Jamie, he doesn't mind me going through his example and also just adding my sort of thoughts as we go along. And hopefully that will add some value to you guys. So if you like this sort of content, as always, if you could give this video a big like, it helps me out with the algorithm. And if you haven't already subscribed, why not consider subscribing? Remember, we don't do anything on this channel to try and upsell you any course or anything like that. We just want to document my journey, give you information that other people are giving to me, and also give my perspective. And that's all it is. It's to give you as many tools as we possibly can so that you can make better financial decisions. So guys, let's get into this question. And his example was very specific. He's got a £5,000 debt, which is on a credit card, which is paying 20% APR, which is a huge APR, but I know it's not uncommon. I think they can go up to 30% really with credit cards, but 20% was his example. And he was saying that he's currently paying off the minimum, and I can't remember how much that was, and I don't think he mentioned that because I had to look through the messages and I couldn't see it. But basically he was saying the debt wasn't really going down at any pace. And every month he's got about £150 left over once he's paid his bills, done his shopping, all the rest. And he said to me it's going to take him, he'd worked out about 3 years to pay this debt off. But on the flip side, he'd like to start investing because ultimately his plan is to become wealthy over time. He wanted to open up an ISA and start investing in index funds and really start his investing career going. But he had the question to me, you know, if I invest, I'm only going to invest at 10%, aren't I, with index funds? Whereas I could save 20% on the debt. But it just doesn't feel good, he said, was his message. It doesn't feel good to pay off the debt, where he viewed it as good to invest. So I think that's a really interesting point, isn't it? The psychology behind what motivates you. And this is where I think the Dave Ramsey versus, I guess, the Robert Kiyosaki kind of approach would come into this. So if you look at Dave Ramsey and all the stuff that he does online, it's very much about paying down debt, get that debt gone, you know, and then start investing, creating emergency funds and everything else. But the key thing is to make sure that you get this debt gone as quickly as possible. And he uses the snowball effect, which is to pay off the debts by the least up to the greatest, regardless of APR. So the Dave Ramsey approach would be, let's say for example, we had these following 3 debts. One that was £1,000 at 20%, one at £5,000 at 30%, and one that's £2,000 at 10%. Well, he would say that we should pay off the 20% one first, the one that's £1,000, because it'll be gone quickest. And by doing that, you remove your monthly instalment that you have to make the payment, and you feel like you're getting somewhere quicker. Now, he completely admits mathematically it doesn't make sense. You end up paying more interest overall. And of course you do, because you've left this 30% debt potentially until last, which means you're essentially paying off the one with the middle amount of interest first, the second one third. It's all round the wrong way mathematically, but I understand the principle because it means you're making steps, and psychologically, that really does make sense. Now for me, I'm more mathematically driven, which means that I would approach this more logically and go, actually, what I'm very interested in is getting rid of the biggest APR first. So if I was using the Dave Ramsey approach, I would definitely use, and I think they call this the debt avalanche, and correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I think it's called the debt avalanche, where you actually just target the biggest APRs first, and then from that you move down the cohorts until you get to the very bottom one, and then you pay off the one with the least APR at the very end. And for me that makes sense, and I would add in the caveat of anything that's less than 10%, if I can make 10% on index funds, I'm just going to pay the minimum because I can make more elsewhere. So I think that's a really, really interesting perspective. but you have to have bought into the idea of being debt-free for that to make any sense to you whatsoever. If your idea is to become financially free and it's very much on the investment side, and that's the bit that motivates you, you're probably going to struggle with this side because you're not going to see that as making any inroads on your objective. So I think psychologically that might not work for you. And this is where my questioning, and we had quite a long conversation, about 15-20 messages, and I essentially said to him, whichever way you look at it, with this £150 a month, you have not got enough money coming in to be wealthy in a short space of time, like you're dreaming. So you're going to have to create a bigger spread, which means you're going to have to create a reason why you want a bigger spread, and then you have to be willing to take the action that's going to result in that. And we ended up sort of discussing, I said, look, could you not take an extra shift, and this and that, and we kind of sort of talked about it, and he said, look, I could take an extra shift, and then, over the course of a month, that would probably give me about £400, £500 a month to invest. And I'm like, okay, well now this is becoming much more interesting, isn't it? Now we could start paying off a debt and potentially investing, and you'll feel good about the motivation behind doing the extra shifts at the same time as actually having the impact that you want. Because mathematically speaking, we know if you can save 20% APR rather than make 10%, of course that's better, right? Like there's no planet where saving 20% isn't better than investing for 10%. Of course it is. But you have to have the motivation behind it to make sure you get the result. So for me, I think, and the questioning that I did with him, and I think that everybody should take away from this video, is what is it that motivates you to do the extra that means that you get to live the extraordinary life, if that's what you're after. Now, if you're just after average, then average will probably do it, right? If you want more than average, you're probably going to have to do and become more than average. I mean, this is not rocket science, really, is it? But for me, if I was looking at this, if this was my circumstance, I would probably say that I would want to start seeing some impact as well. And I know for a fact that this makes no mathematical sense whatsoever. But if I had £500 a month, I know that I would want to see my investment pot rising as well as my debt going down. So I know that although it doesn't make mathematical sense, I would probably be splitting it as well. So I think this is where the psychology behind it all comes in. And I'm no psychologist, I just think that it's so interesting that my mind started working like that as soon as he asked me this question. And that we went straight from, how can we do this 150 to how can we make this 150 far more, because ultimately we need to either pay off more or make more to get to his end destination. And then what is the motivation that will mean that you'll do that? And for him, it would be growing this investment pot. So guys, why don't you, if you want to connect with me on Instagram, you're more than welcome to. Equally, if you want to put down in the comments any situations like this and give me your impression of where the psychology comes into it, I'd be massively interested. And I will answer every single one. I know I've been a bit lapse on this recently, and I'll explain why in another video. But guys, I will answer every single one, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. For me, though, I would mix it up, and I want to see my investment pot growing as well as that debt coming down. So guys, I'll see you soon. Take care. Boom. That's a good video.